Good morning, everyone. There's a story told by Al Gore that he was once at a dinner in Washington, D.C., a black tie affair, and he was sitting next to former Senator Bill Bradley. And the waiter came around with the main course, and he says the main course was a piece of chicken, a baked potato, some vegetables, and there was a little swirl of butter that went with the baked potato. And he says, he's sitting next to Bill Bradley, and Bill Bradley, the former senator, looks to the waiter and says, "Excuse me, but can I get another swirl of butter with my potato?" And Al Gore says, the waiter looks at Bill Bradley and says, "I'm sorry, sir, but it's only one per person." And Al Gore describes how Bill Bradley's eyes opened wide with a look of shock. He looked at the waiter and said, "Excuse me, waiter, but do you know who I am?" He says, "No, who are you?" He says, "I'm Senator Bill Bradley. I sit on this and this committee, Oversight and Finance Committee and the Security Committee, and I'm also a former NBA basketball player." And he says, the waiter looks at Bill Bradley and says, "Excuse me, sir, but do you know who I am?" And Bill Bradley says, "No, who are you?" He says, "I'm the person in charge of the butter." You know, yesterday was election day, and it's a good time to think about the idea that, you know, it's not just senators and congressmen who are elected. Every human being in this world is elected by God to do something specific. Everyone has their role that they were given the specific abilities, talents, and resources to fulfill their mission, their purpose for which God elected them in this world. And after election day, it's a good day to ask ourselves, am I fulfilling my duties? What is my platform? Am I living up to my task? And look at your life and say, what did Hashem put me here for? What are my skills? What are my talents? What are my contributions that I can make? Because Hashem put me here for a specific reason. The opening verse of this week's parsha says, this is the story of the children, the offspring of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And you're ready for the story, but then the verse repeats itself. Abraham gave birth to Isaac. The question is, if it already said Isaac's the son of Abraham, it doesn't have to say Abraham is the father of Isaac. It's repetitious. And Rashi quotes a story that Isaac and Abraham looked different, and people said Isaac is not the son of Abraham, because Abraham was an old man when he gave birth. It must have been when Sarah was abducted by Abimelech, he impregnated Sarah, and really the father is not Abraham, it's Abimelech. So what did God do? God made the face of Isaac to be identical, to be a spitting image of his father. So everyone said, no, Isaac, his father is Abraham. You know, in those days they didn't have paternal tests, paternity. So everyone saw on the face, this is his son. Nobody could mock Abraham and say it's not your child. But the question is, usually kids look like their parents in the first place. You know, the first question when a baby's born, who does he look like, right? So why is it that Isaac looks so different than his father, that God had to make a miracle and make his face look like Abraham? And the answer is that we know that Abraham represents the attribute of kindness, a man of hospitality and generosity. Isaac had a completely different personality. His personality was gevura, which is strength, severity. That's why he's always re-digging the wells of his father. He's fighting with the Philistines. He was a man of the determination, of strength, of severity, gevura. But what the Torah perhaps is saying is, even though father and son were so different, they were identical. You know why they were identical? Because they had the same goals in life, the same mission in life. And the lesson is, you don't have to be identical to the next person in your characteristics, in your attributes, in your personality, in your nature, in your skills, in your abilities, in order to be identical. You could be completely different and identical. Why? Because you have the identical goals and vision for life. Abraham and Isaac shared the same vision in life, to bring God's presence into the world and to establish the Jewish nation. And in that regard, they were exactly the same. Were they the same personalities? Completely different. But they realized they were identical in their mission, and therefore they joined together and they had one common goal together, and they saw themselves as images, reflections of each other. And that's a very valuable lesson to learn in life, that someone else may not be in your image, but they're in God's image. And as long as you share a common goal and purpose and destiny, then you are identical, because your intent and your goals are identical. And the way things worked out yesterday, one house belongs to the Republicans, one belongs to the Democrats, and it's the perfect time to say, you know what, we're completely different, we have different values, different ideals, different goals, different perspectives, but we share an overriding commonality, and that is we're all Americans, we want what's the best interest of the country. And we should use our differences to come together. You think of it as a symphony, right? If everyone played the same instrument, it wouldn't be a symphony. It's because everyone has their own instrument, and everyone has their own notes that they have to play. And that's why it creates the beautiful blend and the beautiful music. And that's the way we have to see our lives, whether in our communities. We shouldn't be upset at people who don't think the way we think. We should embrace people because they add to the music of life rather than the noise. The Rambam says that no two people think alike. Ein deoseim shavos. So the way that Maimonides introduces it, he says, just like no two people look alike, no two people think alike. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, why does he have to point out, just like no two people look alike, therefore no two people think alike? So the Kotzker Rebbe says something very beautiful. He says, do you ever resent someone for looking different than you? Do you ever get angry at someone? Why can't you look like me? Why do you have to look like yourself? Can't you look like me? You're happy that people look different because that's what makes the world interesting. You're you, I'm me. Everyone has their own uniqueness. So the same thing, you shouldn't resent someone for having a different view or a different perspective than you. That's part of the beauty and the uniqueness of each person. And so on a day like today, I think we have to think about unity, embracing our differences rather than rejecting those that are differences than us. And more important, to think about what was my purpose, as the famous story of Zusha on his deathbed, when he was crying and a student said, Reb Zusha, why are you crying? And he said, I'm not afraid that God's going to ask me, why weren't you like Moses or like Abraham, Maimonides? Because I'm not as great as them. The one question I'm going to have to answer in the next world is, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha? Every person's put here for a purpose. We have to fulfill the duty for which we were elected by God and placed in this world.